Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where we take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of big finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. Now, before we begin, because in 2019, YouTube was caught data mining the information of young users, therefore violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, they implemented policies to scapegoat creators, meaning that I have to confirm that this video is not meant for children. It is not aimed at kids. It's not targeted towards kids. Doctor Who is a family show that kids can watch, but this video, with all the videos on my channel, will be looking at it from an adult perspective. So viewer discretion is advised. That being said, it is the 15th of April, 2020, and I just finished listening to, and today we are starting a look at the second story in the Season 20 trilogy from 2016, the main range trilogy with Tegan and Nyssa, with Aquitaine, written by Simon Barnard and Paul Morris, who both wrote for the Fourth Doctor, which was released later, but because this came first, because this was 2016, they wrote Planet of the Drashigs, I think. Yeah, Planet of the Drashigs, with Tom Baker and Jane Slavin. But yes, this is... No, they're both the Enchantress of Nevers. Phil Mulrine wrote Planet of the Drashigs. I really should try to remember who wrote what. But yes, there is they are the two writers on this story, and they have, they are both great. Great writers. This episode actually, part one, is actually pretty good. My biggest complaint here is that it's a lot of setup, and it feels a bit too close to standard 1980s Who, but it's at least really fun standard 1980s Doctor Who. Like you have the story starts. Aquitaine it's not a historical story. We're actually in the far future, dealing with the HMS Aquitaine, which has, a life support system on it, and, a bunch of weird things are happening. Like, there's some weird things about possibly time disturbance. Things are just, not necessarily working well with the time that they've got, and the time that that the story can play around with, because there is just a lot of stuff, just a lot of weird things going on, like a little ghosts on this derelict spaceship, which is outside of a black hole, and has a botanical section where the Doctor, Tegan, and Nyssa materialize, and you get to see some really, really, really. It's been a theme with these, basically every story. Every story to feature Tegan and Nyssa since the Waters of Amsterdam that we've covered, they actually are delightful. Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton and Peter Davison all have really good chemistry. Like, they are, they're fun together. There's a lot of stuff with just with the characters having a lot of fun, and sort of spending time together, and just traveling. Like, this isn't like, some crazy different story where it's like, oh, everything is over the top. No, because that's not the it's not what the story does well, and it's not where the story is meant to go. This is a story where you are just having a lot of fun with some weird stuff going on around, just around the plot. Like, this is just, it's different, it's weird, but it's fun nevertheless. it does something different. It plays around with different things and a different style of story, and I really do I do enjoy what the story's doing. Like there's just because there is a lot of stuff, obviously that you can that you can enjoy. Um, there are different characters and different things just that this story does to try and give you something new. I definitely think that it's fun. There's a slight flaw with the fact that this is a story that just kind of, it doesn't do its own thing, but it does this it does this thing where there's just a lot of there's a lot going on here, that you don't really necessarily get to see everything, but you do get a lot of stuff for the story to jump off of, and to really you really do get to enjoy it. Like there's a computer called Hargreaves who is fun, played by Matthew Cottle, who gives a fun performance. But my big complaint here is that it's kind of doing the Crichton from Red Dwarf story, like the story Crichton from Red Dwarf. It's my one big complaint is it's kind of standard 80s sci-fi. Doesn't know if it's taking itself seriously. The ghosts are an interesting concept, and I hope they get fleshed out, because it is good. But overall, this is actually a perfectly good start to the story. It's not perfect. It's great. It's not amazing. It's not, but it is. It's just a great piece of essentially 1980s themed Doctor Who. That's what the first episode does, and it gets you intrigued. It makes me want to learn more and see where the story can go. So overall, I would have to give part 1 of Aquitaine an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 16th of April 2020, and I just finished listening to part 2 of Aquitaine, where you start to see a lot of the ideas seeded and implied through part 1 really come to fruition. I mean this because this is a story where we actually open part 2 with essentially the same narration from Hargreaves as part 1. Obviously, immediately implying that the Doctor as a character has, Hargreaves as a character has not so much lost his mind, but lost his memory. You have a character, losing their memory, having to live as themselves, and doing things, and doing things differently. It's a character who has, who hasn't been able to basically find its own way. It's one that, it's one of those things where you have, you have the story kind of work to be, kind of work just to be one where you know what the character is, is meaning to do. This is this is something, you know, different for the character, and something that is, you know, more of a different a different thing. Like it's one where you have this character insane, but not just in the way of repeating things day by day, and you immediately build in the idea that this is a story, or at least that this story is kind of all about doing basically the characters having characters who are who are stuck in different time zones. That's what the ghosts from the first episode kind of were, is that they were possibly stuck in a different time zone, and Nyssa is stuck in a different time zone with a Dr. Sergei Aquitaine, played by Harry Myers, who played Adrian Wall in the Benny series. And Myers gives a great creepy performance, because he just sort of matter-of-factly poisons Nyssa and basically tries to convince her that he can give her the antidote, and it's like, oh, surprise, there is no antidote. I was lying to you, which is, definitely, it hits weird, because you get to see what these what the story is trying to do and trying to be, with a bunch just weird little with a bunch of ideas, a bunch of different ideas playing out as these characters kind of almost fight through a sort of sense of madness. There's a real insanity to what the story is doing, and what the story is trying to accomplish, with the plot and who the characters are. Because Nyssa goes off and is basically stuck on her own, even though she's perfectly capable. It is still something where you don't get to see that complete capability. You don't. It's something different, something that the characters have to work around with, and you have to play with, because you have a bunch of different robots. You have the ghost ship, but operations as normal, and it's kind of played for comedy. Like, this isn't something where you're playing this for high drama. This is comedic. It's definitely something different. Something for the characters to really enjoy, and you can just sort of see where things are going. It's a really enjoyable comedy episode. Again, it's a bit too Red Dwarf, without a lot of the insane comedy that makes Red Dwarf work, but it's still enjoyable enough that I had a good time watching it and listening to it. It is a really, really solid story. So overall, I would have to give part 2 of Aquitaine a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 17th of April 2020, and I just finished listening to part 3 of Aquitaine. The penultimate episode of the story, and one that I think is quite fascinating, just for the fact that it has, it has been one that where you get to see where a lot of the story, a lot of the story's ideas are coming to you. You actually get a lot of the backstory that they're there are in fact different time zones, but the different time zones aren't nearly as spread out as perhaps one might think. Um, it's one of those things where you have the different time zones being essentially essentially where you get to see a lot of stuff, a lot of things just being a minute, just being a couple of hours or a couple of days out of sync. Even in Tegan's case, it's a couple of hours. Like she's only a couple hours away from the doctor, which is interesting. Like it's one of those stories where you see where you see what the you see what the story can kind of do and be and be around. Like you have the doctor figuring stuff out. You have a lot of bits of the puzzle falling together. Interestingly, as you discover that this is a situation where the characters have kind of found themselves in a situation where you have these creatures called Aconites, who are these who are these things that sort of come out of plants and just exist in that sort of a space, which is interesting. Like the idea is like it's a fungus that is taking people over mentally, but not physically. It's more of a mental thing. Like you have Dr. Akunin being much older than he was, that being revealed here as the characters as the characters really have to sort of discover as the characters discover what has been going on and what these creatures are, and where they sort of fit in, and how they they work. Like you have the sort of idea of this being a story full of these weird creatures that don't, not everything makes sense, and you have like the entirety of like a military sort of force, a military expedition force being there to almost show the way and show what the story is doing, and how these characters are going on. Like Tegan, and this gets some really interesting stuff, as she's still trying to find her own cure and save herself and be something for herself, something, make something out of this weird situation, because it is a weird situation. It's something totally different than what she's used to, and she's playing off of it really well, but it's not normal, and that lack of normalcy is kind of there, and it's important to really note it all as just how odd of a situation this is for the characters to be exploring. And I really do say that I enjoy it. You have just layers of the puzzle being peeled back each episode, It's it's still a little flawed. Again, there's some points where you think, oh, more could have been done with these characters. Again, there's not a lot being you know revealed here, and it's just sort of a bit choppy as everyone is split up. Like even in this episode, where Tegan's split from the Doctor, and Nissa's split from Tegan, and you just it's splitting everything, each one of the characters up. That kind of makes it feel like this is just an awkwardly paced story, and a story that isn't quite there. I mean, it's still great. Like, this is an amazing episode. It's a weird little quirk of an otherwise amazing episode that you don't get to see this. The you don't get to see the characters doing this. Doing this sort of thing, where there isn't everything going on. It's not the normal sort of thing, which it's weird because this is, and sort of like Hargreaves is fun. Like the military crew dealing with this are all fun and interesting characters, and they all have their own damage in their own way that I think is just really, really interesting to explore. Simon Barnard and Paul Morris are both great writers, and they're a great writing team. It's one of those things where you have someone to bounce the ideas off of, so that you can actually try to make the story come across as good and different than something completely new. So overall, I would probably have to give part 3 of Aquitaine a 9 out of 10. It is the 18th of April 2020, and I just finished listening to part 4 of Aquitaine, the final episode of the story. And the episode that brings everything together and really sells what the story has been trying to do from the very beginning, as well as just, it really gives you a good example of how to do a story like this, where it is doing something weird. That there is the differing aspects to this entire plot, based on based on what the story based on what the story can do and can be. It's doing something different, and creating creating a sort of a new landscape, where everything kind of returns to at least some sort of a status quo, but not everything's fixed. Like Hargreaves, our robot butler character, isn't allowed to be given essentially his own life. He was still essentially forced into this sort of fake identity type of a thing, and the story does a good job of sort of creating that this problem of identity, and what the characters do, just with everything. It's one where you have you have the character there, and you have them. You have them as they are, um, but not doing everything amazingly. It's all built up to like a lot of twists dealing with just the Doctor has to figure out, okay, here's how we save this ship. Here's how we save everything. Um, Here's how we stop. Um, here's how we stop. These plants. Here's how we stop. The story from falling apart. Here's how you stop the aconites from spreading and creating themselves. Done in a fairly interesting way, because you have people becoming these plants, because they're basic, because of the time distortion, because of everything. Everything is obviously, this is obviously saved near the end, and everything is brought to an end where we can at least say, okay, everything that happened led to something positive, and the characters were able to survive. But it isn't perfect. It's a a different sort of thing where you have the plot in changing and being different and weird and just something that you don't entirely expect. Like there really is that different, the different just ideas here, with with what the story can be, and what the characters can do. There's just that little bit difference that makes things work, and makes things be interesting and be something different. It's a it's a different thing, and something where you get to see what the characters are doing and what they're trying to do, and everything sort of just little side and isolate. Something that I think Barnard and Morris should be praised for. It's not a perfect episode by means, but it's definitely a very enjoyable episode. And that's the same thing about the story. It's not perfect, but it's enjoyable, and that you can get a good sense of enjoyment from listening here. So overall, I'd have to give part 4 of Aquitaine an 8 out of 10. That being said, we take the scores of each of the 4 episodes, add them up, and average them out to give Aquitaine a final score of 8.5 out of 10. Definitely a good, continuing for this trilogy of Fifth Doctor stories, and a good score to be going out on. So as always, thank you everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment down below your thoughts on the story. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let's get a conversation going. Subscribe if you're not already, and if you are subscribed, hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And join me next time when we conclude the story with this trilogy of Season 20 stories with with a pure historical story, played mostly seriously, by an author most known for comedy in Paul Mars' main range story, the Peterloo Massacre.